Lauren, time is getting away from us, and I have so many questions for you because I know that you have so much knowledge that you could share with us if I just knew how to ask. So let me ask a couple of open-ended questions to catch what I've missed, and we'll call it a day. Open-ended question that I wouldn't think to ask is, what are your biggest pet peeves with manuscripts? What are the most common things that you're seeing writers do that drive you nuts? Yeah, so that way anything I didn't think to ask you about, we can cover here.
Oh gosh. That's like, I feel like that's a really like long-winded, like, could be a very long-winded answer. I think that, in general, there are just like certain basic craft things that, I think an author can really take care of before the manuscript ever sees an editor's eyes. Like making sure that your dialogue is structured correctly, for instance, like that you've got a comma at the end before your dialogue tag. Things, simple things like that. It's difficult, to kind of jump into editing a manuscript and be like, oh gosh, all of the dialogue is formatted incorrectly, or that, paragraph structure is completely off in so many different ways. I think that those are things that you want to consider and that you want to work on revising on your own a little bit before you bring in a professional editor, because then, they're focusing on the things that actually matter, like, this how the story, reads and how the characters, whether they're fully developed and so on and so forth. You don't want them necessarily nitpicking and focusing on correcting every single piece of dialogue and missing comma and so on and so forth. Like, there are certain things that you can catch on your own on a proofread through or during revisions before you ever engage a professional editor. So I guess that's one thing. Sorry, you caught me a little off guard. Like, I'm trying to figure out, like, other things that, are big pet peeves of mine. I guess, okay, this is a very, very specific one, but I remember, like, occasionally I would see a book come in on submission, usually from a male author who was trying to write a teenage girl, and write a YA novel from the perspective of a teenage girl. And her voice would just be like, absolutely like Valley Girl, like overly dramatic, like, super like, oh my gosh, everything is awful, holy crap, like I'm just reacting all over the place like crazy. Like, that kind of thing bothers me, where the author clearly hasn't researched the character that they're trying to write, and that they're trying to, they're basically applying stereotypes, and that they're not, like really getting into the nuances of what these characters should be and could be, like all the potential that they have. So that's something that sometimes will bother me, if like a character is like so very obviously a caricature or a stereotype of what this person thinks that character should be, and it's very off the mark.
When I encounter that, I run fiction workshops, and we go through and evaluate many people who are just writing their first book or for the first time, and we'll encounter that's usually by the time you get to book number 2 or book number 3, somebody, hopefully, or your wife or the woman in your life has said, honey, don't do this. Hopefully that's happened for them. But I tend to try to think as favorably as I can that that's not sexism, though of course it is, so much as it's just bad writing. And I feel the same way about some racism in stories, that's your intention is not bad. This is a crime of ignorance. Let's improve your writing ability, and that's how I'm able to continue to shake their hand and be nice to them every week. That's how the workshop is through.
Yep.
So I tend to put that in separate categories. It's bad writing. Sort that out, and then hey, you'll learn something. You'll be broadened. Any other pet peeves we should throw on the list?
Oh gosh, there was someone that I was actually just thinking about, and then it completely flew out of my brain.
2 o'clock tonight, just as you're about to drift off to sleep, it'll come back to you.
No, I heard about something you were saying, and now it completely just flew out of my brain. So, yeah. Anyway, sorry, it's gone.
These things happen, especially they happen to me all the time. This is a challenging format, this podcasting thing, because you have to hear me speak extemporaneously, and I prefer to write because my words are going to be far more considered. That Ted Kaczynski joke from earlier never would have made a second draft. I'd have taken that thing up, but now it's in there forever. What are you going to do? Well, one other thing I wanted to ask you about was reading, because I had read and stalking you that you got in trouble as a child for hiding books at dinner.
Yeah.
Continuing to read I would think every parent's dream that you're that motivated to read and you love the books that much. Has your relationship with books changed over the years of working so closely with the book? I assume it's changed, but are you still able to kick back? Okay, it's the weekend. I've done all the work I have to do. Now it's time to read something fun.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I actually have sort of a, especially when I was working for a traditional publisher, I had kind of a method to my madness, if you will. I would, whenever I had to read submissions for work, or if I had to read a manuscript that I was working on or something like that, I would read it on my Kindle that the company had supplied to me, so that all of my reading would be done on the Kindle for anything that was work related. Versus, if I was reading for fun on my own, it would either be a print book, of course, or reading on the Nook app on my iPad. So would actually have two completely separate devices for my reading, basically. And that actually still is kind of how I format things. I just bought myself a Kindle on Black Friday because there was a great sale. Yay.
Me too. They're fantastic.
Yay. So that'll be when I'm doing manuscript assessments, I'll do I'll read them on that and everything. I'll continue to read on my iPad. I actually do a lot of digital reading now, more than I ever expected that I would, even for enjoyment. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, I'm actually able to turn off the editor brain to be able to enjoy books. Every now and again, I will come across a book that, where something about it will just really niggle at me. And I'm just no, the world building could have been so much better if I'd been the editor on this book. It happens pretty rarely, but when it does, it just bothers me so much. And I can't get out of the editor brain. I just sit there and I think about it the entire time I'm reading it. Oh gosh, and there was this one instance I remember the very first time this ever happened. I won't mention what book it was, but I remember we had assigned a book for my book club. We were reading. We used to do a YA fantasy and historical fantasy and historical fiction book club, and so there was a book that we were reading. And I started reading it for book club, and I was just this seems so familiar, but this book just came out. There's no way I've read it before. What is going on right now? And I'm reading, and I'm like, I've read this. Sorry, I've read this book before. I know I've read this book before. And it occurred to me that I had actually rejected it. About a year or two before that. And I was oh my God, it was the first time it had ever happened to me. It was the weirdest experience ever. Because I kept reading it. I'm I swear I've read this book before. It's so familiar. It's so derivative. And then I was no, I rejected this book. And I was totally forgot about it. I think they changed the title and stuff, but largely there hadn't been I don't know. I would have done more editing on the book. Let's just put it that way. So it was just very, because it hadn't really changed much at all since I had seen it on submission and passed on it. So that was a very weird experience.
But obviously it was a good submission to you because it was up your alley if you ended up reading it for fun later.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's, always really, and there haven't been a ton of instances where, books that got away, I've gone back and actually had time to read them when they've been published. I do actually want to do a little bit more of that now that I'm, outside the industry and have a little bit more time, going back and reading books that I lost at auction or something like that, or that they went with another house or something, and going back and being what did that editor do with it? What could I have done better? But I also try not to do too much of that.
How were the sales numbers? Oh, I could have got those up.
I mean, that's not always so much in an editor's control. You know what I mean? Yes, there's, a certain amount of the sales can, of course, come, from the quality of the book and all the word of mouth that comes from having a really great, fantastic book with great reviews and so on and so forth. But by the same token, a book that gets 5 stars, from various different, outlets can go on to sell peanuts, or a book that, gets tons of terrible trade reviews can go on to sell millions of copies. Quality is sometimes has something to do with it, but also, if there's an addictive quality to your story, or if you have just a really good marketing campaign, good publicity. Like that's, every bit as big of a part of promoting a book as the actual content itself. You want to, of course, put the best book out there that you can, but at the end of the day, if it gets no marketing support, who's going to find it?
Well, if I come to you with my project and I want to pick your brain about marketing, is that something that you offer additional help on?
I mean, it's not, I will say it's not completely my area of expertise. There are certain things that, like, I know from my years working in an in-house as an in-house editor, there are certain things that I can say, hey, I know for a fact that like our marketing team would never do anything like that because it's a waste of money. Like there's like, for instance, for a young adult audience, Facebook advertising is a waste of your dollars because teens aren't on Facebook. Like it's just, that's where it is. Like they're on Instagram, they're, so a storygram tour or something like that is really kind of like the thing that you want to pursue for that younger audience, so things like that, like, just general know-how. Yes, I can provide some guidance in that respect, but I am by no means like a seasoned marketing guru. So.
Lauren, I'm gonna call it because this is a privilege and a pleasure, and I know that I will continue talking your face off, and you'll be polite and continue to talk to me and not stop me from talking your horse, and then later you'll be like, why was it so long? So I want to stop it while everybody's still having a good time. So here's my last question for you, and we'll call it a day. And my last question is always some variation. If there was one bit of advice for all the authors out there who are listening, if there was one thing you could, one or two, however many things you want, that would make their path easier, that one thing they could do to immediately improve their writing, improve their odds of being successful within publishing, however they decide to publish, what wisdom would you impart to them?
First of all, keep writing. Like that's I think the big thing is making sure that you're always continuing to hone your craft and, continuing to write books. Like you said, don't publish your first book. You end up publishing like your third or your fourth or your second book, even if the first one doesn't pan out, continue to write, because with every book that you write, you're going to become a better writer. And the other piece of advice that I would give is, don't be afraid to share your work. I know that it's really scary to share it with people and to get that outside opinion because people might hate your book. Like it is what it is. People are going to love it or they're going to hate it, and there's going to be people from both sides of the spectrum among your readership. And I think not being afraid to listen to criticism, especially if it's offered constructively, that's something that's, I think really important for authors to keep in mind is, that feedback when offered in a constructive way is really great to listen to and to weigh and to try to incorporate into your manuscript and your writing. And that every opportunity that you have to, form critique partnerships and, get beta readers and so on and so forth is an opportunity, to improve your craft. And every opportunity to work with a professional editor as well is a really great way to improve your craft, because I think, something that we see a lot with, like manuscript assessments and things like that is that, ultimately a book may not necessarily be the one that's going to get published, but working with somebody on a manuscript assessment, for instance, like to at least get a sense of like what is and isn't working in your story for your characters and so on, is a lesson that you can take forward as you're writing in the future, and as you're writing more books. So I think that, every opportunity that you can to get constructive feedback, editorial guidance, people weighing in on your stories and everything like that is an opportunity that shouldn't be missed. So those are just, two, I guess, big pieces of advice.